it's even worse in the case of games, because with games you have to develop a community, so it's not just one person who suffers from that, it's the community of potential players who can't find other players. So
welcome to the Character Sheet, comic books home for everything tabletop and fantasy news. I'm producer Pete, and I'm joined by a legend of the industry, the man behind the magic, and also Netrunner, and also Robo Rally, and also dozens and dozens of games, the Chase Rare himself, Mr. Richard Garfield. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about Magic and D&D and your new Kickstarter.
Well, it's great to be here. Always love talking about games.
So let's start a little bit at the beginning, because we're going to talk. You have got a new Kickstarter coming out called Half Truth, Second Guess, which is a follow-up to your very popular Half Truth trivia game. But let's talk about how you got into this, because I think you've credited your love of Dungeons and Dragons as being the thing that kind of propelled you into game design. How did you go from Dungeons and Dragons to creating something like Magic and then everything else after that?
Well, yeah, Dungeons and Dragons was a very pivotal game for me. When I first played it, my mind was blown. It just broke all the rules I knew about games and opened up this world. And rather than going super invested into Dungeons and Dragons, which was a lot of people's reaction, my reaction was to get super invested in games in general. And so I researched games, tried to see what was out there. I figured if something like Dungeons and Dragons existed and I hadn't known about it, then there might be whole worlds that I didn't know about. And so I set out to explore what games had to offer. And that's what eventually led me to Magic, was sort of connecting all these threads of things that I really loved in all these games that I had discovered.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I guess before we dive into, because there's Magic's a lot in the headlines right now, but just as kind of like a background, you worked on Magic through, I believe, 2000 was, I think that was the year that, is that the year that you split off from the Hasbro Wizards merger thing?
Yeah, 2000 was when I left Wizards, I believe, but I have worked on Magic since then as a contractor on several sets.
Fantastic.
I haven't worked on it for since the pandemic, before the pandemic, but it might happen in the future.
Oh, perfect. And that lets me flesh this out a little bit. And that was just, as a player or a designer, do you have a particular Magic set that you either loved making or just like love playing? Do you have like a personal little crown jewel from all the Magic sets you've either played or contributed to?
Oh boy, no. I usually think in terms of individual mechanics and individual cards. The sets I'm most attached to are the very first set and Arabian Nights, because it felt like the world was wide open then, and I was doing the exploring. After that, I did participate in a lot of sets and guiding it, but I really wanted the designers and developers to have ownership, so I didn't want to be the boss. And I realized that Magic was so broad that having your quality, your construction filtered through one person, no matter who they were, would be really limiting. And so I wanted a lot of people involved, a lot of ideas, and so that's one of the reasons why very early on I got out of Magic and started working on Netrunner and VTAS and BattleTech and other games.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, the BattleTech card game. I remember that one too. That was great. So we'll talk a little bit now about some of there's like two big sort of overarching stories in Magic right now. And one, because it's tied to something you've spoken on before, is Wizards of the Coast, like just yesterday, had to basically take back control of Commander from their independent rules committee. It was a fan-based format largely. But because of this new trend of using Magic cards as investments, a series of cards got banned. It made some very valuable cards plummet in value, and that's led to some really toxic comments and like even death threats from these the finance bros out there who are investing in Magic rather than playing Magic. Did you ever conceive of a world where Magic would sort of become like this sort of cardstock version of Wall Street? And like, what are your feelings on the idea of Magic as an investment? Because we've seen, I mean, it might have some positives, but we've definitely seen some huge negatives recently.
No, I did not anticipate that at all starting out. I and it was one of the major things we had to overcome in the first few years of the game. People began speculating on it, and it made it so that it was too expensive for people to play casually. Now, a lot of the people in the company and in the industry thought it was a fad, and it was something that people would invest in, go up in value, and eventually crash. But the people who were working on the design saw it as being ongoing, evergreen, because at its heart it was a game. And in fact, the playtesters had been playing for 2 years with the same set, and there was nothing collectible about it. It was just it was a game where you could customize your own deck, and that's what was the fascination with it. So when Fallen Empires came out, we managed to actually crash that market, and that a lot of people thought that the game was going to end at that point. But in fact, that's when it really began to explode in popularity, because it's the gameplay which is important, I believe, not any sort of trader value. Now, I don't see any reason for it not to be a collectible in the long term, like stamps, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't put out something and expect it to go through the roof immediately. That works against the players. And there's an analogy here which can really help you see that. Is you can imagine that an author writes a book, and they print 1,000 copies of it, and then they won't print that book anymore because they want that to maintain its value. That is not what the book is about. That works against sort of the essence of the book. They should be just doing something else if that's what they're doing. And it's even worse in the case of games, because with games you have to develop a community. So it's not just one person who suffers from that. It's the community of potential players who can't find other players. So I think collectability really can work against gameplay, and it naturally does work against it.
It's an excellent point and excellent analogy. And I guess in this perfectly kind of segues into the last big Magic question, and that is, speaking of sort of force shortage and supply of demand, there's been a new push by Magic in the last several years, these universes beyond. What's the feeling like to see like something you created branch into like all these other things? A lot of things which you got to come full circle with. Like Magic has now had a couple D&D sets. It's had a Rings of Power set, but also it's just crazy to see something you created have this much connection to like the greater like geek sphere in general, like Warhammer and D&D, and like what is that feeling like as a creator?
Well, it's gratifying and overwhelming and a bit scary. My biggest joy in that regard is bringing games to so many people, because I think games are just this marvelous enterprise, and anybody I can get into it or help improve their experience with games, I think I'm doing the world some good. And as far as Magic has done that, I'm very, very, very pleased. But yeah, I'm kind of more of a quiet person, and so it does overwhelm me when it gets when it gets as crazy as that, and touches so many people, especially when it's non-game sort of things, when it's the collectability.
When Post Malone buys a card for $1 million and it's making headlines everywhere, I imagine that's a very strange feeling.
It is, yes.
But we've talked a lot about Magic, but we need to talk about this new Kickstarter you have. And let's start by saying, how did you like come about with the original version of Half Truth? Like what led you from, because you're known for doing these card games and for these other board games like Robo Rally, and like just what brought you to the realm of a trivia game, and how did Half Truth come about?
Well, my philosophy with games, and which I alluded to earlier, was that I wanted to know everything that was out there, and I fed my game design in part by learning those games and learning what people loved in them. And so when there was a game that I didn't care for, I would often try to go back and try to figure out what people loved, and that helped me with my other design, and it also often helped me appreciate that and learn to like it myself, which I think is makes my life better, and makes me understand games better. So back in the aughts, I read this book, Brainiac, by Ken Jennings, and Ken Jennings, of course, is the
Jeopardy champion.
Jeopardy champion. Yep, exactly. And I was really swept up with his love of trivia. He really communicated it well, and I really was embarrassed to realize that I had never given this area of games any deep thought. And so based on that book, I decided to try to try to design a trivia game which addressed all the things which he loved in trivia, and those included things like he saw it as being very egalitarian, like anybody can contribute in trivia, and you don't know where the insights are going to come from. And that really, I hadn't really thought about that, because I thought about trivia as being something which only the nerds could win, and you had to be a trivia geek in order to really do well. But then I thought about my experiences, and I realized my favorite experience was playing trivia type games, and my grandmother would be in the room, and she wouldn't do much with the game, but then every once in a while she'd pull these answers out that nobody had any chance of getting. And so she might not have won, but she was participating in this really in this way that made the experience special, and everybody had a chance in the spotlight. And so that led to the Half Truth. And with Half Truth, you've got I tried to pull the questions from everywhere I could think of, and I made them so that they were all multiple choice, and that half the answers were correct and half were incorrect. And this and then the more that you answered, the better you did. And this turned out to be a really nice formula, because there just was so much you could do with it, and the way the scoring was put together was something where you having serious trivia knowledge would not necessarily give you a huge edge over people who did not, and of course. If you've got serious trivia knowledge, you are more likely to win. But to illustrate this, I actually had Ken over, and we played with some friends, and he won the first game, but the second game somebody else won, and the other player was a perfectly good trivia player, but he was not a Ken Jennings, and I think that's where it cinched it for him. That's when he really wanted to be involved, and of course, he was very important putting together a lot of the questions and a lot of the format.
Oh, well, that's awesome. And I guess, and the Kickstarter is for the new edition of this called Second Guess. So what has changed between Half Truth and Half Truth Second Guess?
Well, Second Guess provides a lot of extra questions, because there were only so many in the first set, and so people who want new questions, they can get them with Second Guess. It also provides some lighter ways to play. So rather than having so it's faster and does not involve as much equipment. So it's a lighter game. So if you have Half Truth, You can get it for the extra questions and for a new version to play, which is faster if that's what you want to do. And if you don't have Half-Truth, then you can get this, and it's a standalone game, which works like Half-Truth did, but is a little bit more streamlined.
So I like to end every interview by giving the guests a chance to talk about, something they feel like the viewers need to know, and in this case about Half-Truth Second Guess. So what is like the big takeaway you want viewers to have from this interview about Half-Truth Second Guess and the game itself?
Well, the thing which I think is most important about Half-Truth, and I like in general, is that there's a lot of people who have a standoffish relationship with trivia, and what Ken's book opened my eyes to. That's what I've tried to put into Half-Truth. And so if you're on the fence about trivia, you should look into this game, because I think it would really open your eyes as to how wonderful trivia is. That book and this subsequent game really got me into enjoying trivia contests and trivia nights, and just any trivia game that I could get my hands on. And I really think that Half-Truth does a good job at getting across what is marvelous about trivia.
That sounds amazing. And so if you are interested in Half-Truth, the Kickstarter will be going live. I will put the date on the screen here right now as I'm talking, and I'll also add in the Kickstarter goals and stretch goals, so you can see a little bit of what you'll get rewarded for trying out this new trivia game that's not just for the trivia nerds out there like me. But by all means, check out the Kickstarter when it goes live. Richard Garfield, we cannot thank you enough. You have made so many of the games that we have loved growing up on this channel and still currently play. And we are just a pleasure to talk to you guys. And as always, viewers, do the liking and the subscribing and the YouTube stuff. Thank you again for being here, both viewers and, of course, Richard Garfield. And we'll have a video for you tomorrow. And until then, stay safe, everybody.